Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about Scavengers Reign episodes 9 and 10. They are called The Mountain and The Decision respectively. So spoilers for the two episodes, and of course this is a Patreon sponsored review, so thank you to Alison for picking the show. So we're getting near the end game now, the next video with the last two episodes. So we're kind of getting into sort of the higher stakes part, and I feel like the ending of both of these episodes, which is effectively the same cliffhanger twice. I don't mean that in a bad way. It's an evolution of the same thing, but we don't see the monster throughout these two episodes except the final scene in both. And the end of episode 9 is the monster seeing the ship, the Demeter, in the distance, and it's like, oh, it's going to get there soon before any of the other characters do. And then the end of episode 10 is the monster going into the ship and literally getting into the darkness of the entrance of the ship and ending in this very ominous note, like, will the people in the cryosleep even be alive when the others get there? So, you know, that's just building up to the ending and doing like the sense of dread that this may all be hopeless, that this awful thing may already have ruined the chance of any kind of happiness. Also, I was informed that this monster's got a name. It is Hollow. That is what it's referred to in the material and whatnot. I don't think anything said that in the show, but it's interesting at least. So, yeah, once again, we have kind of two main plot lines, though, throughout these two episodes. Both episodes have kind of like a sort of standalone opening scene, and then we follow the two groups of characters. One is Sam and Ursula, and everything going on with them, and their trust issues, which leads to a kind of a big pivotal moment in the episode 10 with Sam. And then the other characters being, of course, Azzy and the other relative newcomers of Chris and Barry being the younger guy. And just to tackle the opening scenes of both episodes first, because they're kind of standalone. The start of episode 9 is kind of the backstory to the old woman that we kind of encountered over the last couple of episodes, where we see that she crash landed on this planet with her husband, and they were kind of happy, and they were sort of documenting the different life forms and plant life, and this idea that they were going to use the planet in the way that we've seen a lot of the characters use the planet. They had this kind of hopeful idea of making a life here. Only this parasite thing had turned the husband into this drone zombie for it. In the same way that we saw Sam building a den for it, this husband starts doing the same thing. So we, the audience, see a lot of repeated actions through this character. And then this idea that the seed that it vomits up, the husband vomits up this little seed that he puts into his wife, in this backstory. And it kind of like establishes that even though the wife fights back and the wife ends up kind of having to kill her husband in a moment of you know, horror as she sees this monster and everything kind of culminates, we kind of get the idea that the reason why she ultimately was just as much of a drone of this creature when our characters met her much later on in life is because of that seed being put in her. And it kind of like means that we have this running threat throughout the episodes of, is Sam going to do that? In fact, the cliffhanger at the end of this episode 9 of the two of them, is him almost putting the seed in and her catching him, Ursula catching him doing it and saying, what the hell were you about to do? So, and that's like one of the ominous, it's not the very final scene actually, because obviously, like I said, the monster ends the episodes, but like the final scene with them is kind of this moment of like trust being completely shattered between them. So, it's a good little flashback sequence, particularly like her making the tombstone or the monument for her husband, which we saw, that was her first tease of that character, so it was kind of a nice full circle element to that. The opening scene of episode 10 is the really exciting one. I really quite like this, because we see that basically various creatures on the planet are moving pieces of like machinery, right? Like, you know, screws, bolts, bits of metal, circuitry, whatever. And it's all sort of coming together. Now, there was a little moment where I was thinking, wait, are they reassembling a ship or something? And it clicked. There was a moment very specifically where it just clicked for me, where I realized what they were rebuilding and why it makes sense that they're rebuilding it. And that is Levi. This is like an almost Iron Giant-esque like reformation of Levi. And the reason why it made sense to me is because, you know, Levi had been kind of, you know, like almost as like a positive version of what happened to Sam with the parasite, like around his heart. It feels like Levi was giving a more like pleasant and, you know, acceptance into the ecosystem by the planet and the all that like sort of fungus that was on Levi's circuitry basically meant that Levi was connected to the planet. So the planet is putting Levi back together. And it was just, and obviously I was expecting by the end of the episode Levi to make a big entrance. We didn't get that, so I'm still expecting that in episode 9. Maybe it'll be towards the end of episode, or sorry, not 9, 11, because there's 12 episodes. Maybe towards the end of episode 11 we'll get that big moment where Levi shows up and saves the day. Because I mean, Azzy at the end of episode 10 is in a bit of a predicament, so maybe Levi will come in and save the day, and it'll be a great reunion between those characters. And I'm not mad at it. Like, I'm not, like sometimes when they bring something back, it can devalue the moment where they died, right? But I think with Levi, one being a robot, the rules are a little bit different. But I think because of that connection where the planet had effectively been kind of like evolving Levi and making Levi more of a living being, and like she could sense the world around her kind of thing. Like, all of that really made this feel earned, where once you sort of see that fungus kind of sticking all the parts back together, it was like, oh no, I get this. I get why this was like a way to get her back, was because the planet is going to want to put her back and reassemble her. So it's almost like the natural defense against the Hollow, the monster, is the planet is like reassembling, like the force for good, because the ecosystem needs balance of some kind. And this monster, perhaps because it was able to manipulate a human being, has gained too much power. It's too much of a threat now, and perhaps Levi is going to be the balance that can restore things. Maybe I'm being too hopeful there. Maybe I'm being too ambitious with those thoughts. But I don't know. There was a lot of hope in that opening scene. So yeah, Sam and Ursula's whole thing kind of boils down to this lack of trust. In episode 9, she kind of questions Sam, who claims that he's back to normal and he understands who he is. He's not like freaking out or building a den or anything like that. And that is true, and he does answer questions that only he could answer. He even shares a little bit about his private life and that he had a girlfriend right before he left, and says that that's what he remembers, which is good because he's going to die at the end of episode 10, and this is kind of a way to humanize him a little bit again. Not that he necessarily was lacking that before. The way he always cared about Ursula and making sure Ursula could survive without him felt very, it felt like very selfless already, and that he always cared about her being able to finish things if he couldn't, and that maybe he would have to be the one that goes down because he's the old man kind of thing. But this was like, oh no, he did have a personal life. He did care about someone. It's something that he never told Ursula about, so she's surprised to even hear it. But of course, we get the whole bit, like a lot of their plot in episode 9 is kind of using this big like a shell from a creature as a boat and going down a river to speed up the process. But they end up in the water, and there's a little action sequence where she gets attacked by a creature. It looks like a vine, but it turns out to be the tail of whatever this creature is that comes up to bite her. And Sam comes over and has to save her, and you're thinking, oh, this is like him winning her trust back. He's in full save her mode. But when he gets her up to the surface and she's like passed out from the almost drowning, the urge to like plant his seed, and that sounds really dirty, but it does make sense in the context, because he coughs up this black seed and he's almost about to put it in, like he's reaching to do it, and she wakes up and catches him and is like, what were you about to do? And it ends in this really kind of sad, bitter moment of, oh no, like the trust might be in an even worse place than we started with in this episode now. And the next episode, there's like a really sort of like beautiful but sad sequence where they're just sort of both standing or sitting on a creature that has like a big disc-like head. It's like a giraffe, but with like a big, huge like UFO style head that they can both sit on. They're basically just hitching a ride on it, and they're just kind of sitting like really far apart in silence. But there's a lot of little moments where Sam kind of like really tries to be honest about everything that he's feeling. He describes the idea that he has this urge, like a hunger, to plant this seed in something's mouth. Not just her mouth, but even like other creatures. Like he says he wants to put one of these seeds in this other little thing that's around. And he talks about how it's this urge, and he can feel it, and he can also feel the planet. It's like the planet is like made up of I can't remember what word to use, but it's when they're, I think it's when they're in the boat actually in episode 9. He talks about how he can sense they're in a different place, like a place where there's no life in this part of the planet. And I was wondering if it was the monster, the Hollow, that was responsible for this area feeling dead because it had killed everything, maybe, or something like the balance is off, like the ecosystem is being, that sort of like leans back into the idea of like the ecosystem, the planet trying to like build a defense against the Hollow. The Hollow's gotten too powerful, and that's a problem. So yeah, all of this is whatever. The big thing though is that there's a lot of little moments where he like insists that he walk up in front of her so that she can feel safe. He even tells her to take a knife out, and she initially says, "I'm not going to stab you, Sam," but then she does pull the knife out, and it's like, hey, there is a danger here. She can't really trust him, and he knows that she can't really trust him, and he's concerned that she can't trust him. He's very open and honest about everything he's feeling now, and it felt like he was being as genuine as possible with the possibilities of what might happen because of this parasite. She's still kind of optimistic that they'll get the parasite out eventually, but ultimately, when they get to the point where they can see the ship, the Demeter, like he collapses against a tree, and he kind of says, like, I can't make it, and this parasite can't just be taken out. You have to go without me. And it was a sad scene. She has to say goodbye. She doesn't turn around and look at him again when she walks off. And, it's been kind of what their story's been building up to for several episodes at this point, is her kind of taking the leadership role from him, and that she's going to have to be this. So that's a good thing. My favorite part about it, though, is that he has this moment of agency in his death. I mean, the episode's called The Decision, episode 10, and I think it really works for him as a character. That not only does he decide that he's not going to go back to the ship and risk putting anyone else in danger, he also decides to end on his terms here, because after Ursula walks away, he opens that kind of door that was made in his body to get to the heart, and he just rips the parasite out and crushes it in his hand. And it was made especially clear by Ursula that thing might be what's keeping him alive, because technically he should be dead. It makes me think a little bit of the facehugger in Alien, and how like if you take that off, it'll kill the person. He knows that. He at least knows that that's the strong possibility here. But he chooses to take it off and kill it himself, and he kills this thing that's been manipulating him, that's been making him do bad things and almost made him betray friends. He takes the agency with his final moments to end things his way by killing this thing that's done that to him, and go out kind of a hero next to this tree. And it's a really beautiful little moment, and I think it's a really nice contrast to Kamen's story, actually, because Kamen let himself be taken over by the Hollow, and all these things have happened because Kamen helped it. Whereas Sam, on the other hand, after being manipulated for a bit, has been kind of trying to fight it, and has been trying to really consider what it is and how it's affecting him. And in this final moment, he turns against it and says, no, I'm dying the way I want to. And I thought that was a really good moment for Sam as a character. And it does feel like we're getting into the big final pair of episodes, because we've had like a major character like die here at this point. So yeah, their stuff was pretty good, especially episode 10. I think this has been a thing in this show where usually one plot feels like the more important of the two out of the pair. And I think that's consistent with these two, where I think in episode 10, the Sam and Ursula stuff was definitely the more important feeling plot. And that's not to say that nothing important happens with Azzy and the others in that episode. It does. There's a big pivotal moment where Azzy kind of fights back, and it kind of splits them up, and they end up like tying her up and leaving her there. And that's kind of the moment she ends on. But to me, a lot of the more interesting stuff with their characters was in episode 9, which is where they're climbing a mountain. But it's not even what they're doing that's the interesting part. It's more the relationships that she's having with these two characters, where Barry's a little bit more closed off because of what happened, because he blames himself for what happened with the other guy. But Azzy still tries to like tell him it's okay, it's not his fault, and he kind of opens up and says, oh, he was my best friend, I wish I told him. And Azzy comforts Barry, and it's like a sweet couple of little moments, but it leads to them bonding, where he like sort of teaches her how to like climb a little bit better, right? And it's good advice, and she mentions, I think Mia's the name, and we get a little flashback in episode 10 of her meeting Mia. At least I don't think we ever actually heard her name in that scene, but I'm assuming this is the Mia that she ended up falling for, this girlfriend that she has on the ship. She talks about her, and it's really important here that she's basically telling Barry about one of the people that she's going to potentially save when they get back to the ship. That one of the people in cryosleep is this person that I care about, And Barry even says, oh, she sounds pretty cool. I want to meet her then. And she's like, yeah, I hope you do meet her. So it's really kind of establishing this idea that there's tangible people to save on the ship, right? In cryosleep. Not just for us, the audience, although that is important. That is absolutely important. But it's giving Barry the human side of that. Like there's a person there that is worth saving individually before we even consider the fact that there's dozens and dozens potentially, or however many they said there were. So that's really important, because almost right after that is when Chris starts like kind of trying to pivot Azzy and keeps saying to Azzy, hey, you're one of us now. All that matters is me, you, and Barry, and the ship doesn't matter. It's all about us. It's all about us trusting each other. And does a whole like trust thing where she kind of like dangles Azzy over the edge of the cliff when she's like helping her up. And Azzy like says, hey, if you do that again, like I'm going to remind you what fear feels like. But she keeps saying things like, hey, the ship doesn't matter. It's all about us. Like we'll take what we need from the ship and it'll help our colony. But these other things don't matter. To the point where she even says like, hey, all the people on your ship are already dead. And I don't necessarily think that Chris either believes or doesn't believe that. Maybe she does, but it's more about she just considers them dead already, I think. But it's all really just an attempt to try and like kind of like brainwash sounds like a harsh term, but sort of push Azzy to the point where Azzy feels like she's part of this new group, so that she won't get in the way of what Chris thinks they need to do, and will be controlled. It's almost like Chris is, in the same way that like Sam had the parasite on his heart, Kamen has the hollow as his kind of big manipulative creature. It's almost like the manipulative creature in this story is Chris. There's a human being that's trying to manipulate Azzy into seeing things her way. And ultimately, Azzy being a heroic character isn't going to have it. So when they're crossing the river in episode 10, and Azzy like proved herself very useful. She's the one that comes up with the sticky stuff for the shoes so that they don't slide off the rocks. She says like, hey, I need to know that when we get to the ship, you're not going to get in the way of me waking people up. That, like you want to take stuff from the ship, that's fine, I don't care, but like you're not going to stop me from doing the right thing. And Chris won't answer. Chris keeps dodging the question, so Azzy ends up hitting her. And when she's having the standoff with Chris is in the water, that's when Barry hits Azzy in the head with a rock. And it feels kind of sad because we know Barry likes Azzy. We know Barry is starting to sympathize with some of the people that Azzy's been talking about on the ship, like Mia. And this idea that maybe that'll be why he eventually does kind of like realize that Chris is doing bad things or is being too selfish or whatever. But it does feel like he is so indoctrinated with her right now because he's been kind of under her control for some time. And the death of his friend kind of like led him further down that path, that it does feel like a tragic moment of him being like young and naive, and he's able to be manipulated into being so loyal. And that's what Chris wants. Chris wants people to be loyal to her. And that's kind of what she had before with their little trio. And she's kind of trying to get Azzy to be that. So I think that's kind of an interesting comparison. Now, I only thought about that as I was talking about it there, that Chris is kind of the equivalent to the parasites in the other stories. But it's an interesting thing to think about. So yeah, they leave Azzy tied up, and maybe that's where Levi will come and save her, if that's the case. But I think where these two episodes leave us off, getting into this final couple, is really strong. I think the tease of the monster getting to the ship feels big. It feels like all the hope might be lost, and it might mean Chris is ultimately right that they are already dead, and that's really tragic if that's the case. But I'm excited for Levi showing back up, and I think Sam had a great send-off, and I really do love that he had agency in his final moments where he got to make that decision to not go, and he got to kill the thing that was trying to change him and trying to make him do bad things. He stood up against it in a way that Kamen has yet not been able to do. Maybe Kamen will have that moment in the final episodes, but he has not had it yet. So, yeah, really interesting character stuff going on here, for sure. I guess the only critique I would have of these two episodes is that the obstacles that they face, I don't think are that interesting, or certainly not as interesting as some of the other obstacles they've had earlier in the show. And maybe at this point, I've seen enough obstacles that it's just another obstacle. Having to climb this cliff, cross this river, it's just another obstacle at this point. So maybe that's the one critique I would say. However, I care a lot more about the characters and their dynamics and what their character stories are progressing and how the themes are intermingling between the various plots. That's less of an issue, really. But it is worth mentioning. It would maybe just put it above a little bit more as the idea if it could feel fresh in that sense. But oh, there you go. That's my thoughts on the penultimate pair of episodes for Scavengers Reign. I will be back early in the month with the final 2 episodes, so look forward to that. And then I don't know what Alison's leading me on to after that, but we'll find out. So let me know what you thought of this pair of episodes in the comments below. Like, subscribe, all the usual stuff helps out a bunch, and you can support over on patreon.com/MailFuzzTV or YouTube membership if that's more your thing. Any support is greatly appreciated. Thank you very much for joining. I do appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?